Hey, and we're live. This is so exciting. This is like my first new type of stream. I want to do some interviews and so forth. And my friend Joseph Cotto, days. I'm a history geek, so I love that sort of thing. But I think it's accessible to anyone. It's not like a boring read. It's something that you can get through pretty easily. Just because what I'm also working on another book, Ulysses. Joseph, I don't know if you heard of that by James Joyce.
Oh, yes, I have.
Oh my God, that's like the opposite. Your book is easy to read. James Joyce is like, what a nightmare. But so it's a great book. And let me introduce Joseph Cotto. I don't know if he needs introduction, but he does a podcast stream with Cotto Gottfried. I think you title it, right?
Yep, that's
And
it.
I will link it when I post a video. I'll put a link. You guys could check it out. I've been on their stream is excellent. They bring up interesting topics and talk about it. And as I said, Joseph has written a book called Runaway Masters, and it's interesting. It's an interesting part of American history. So it's kind of weird. I got some notes, but I'm just going to kind of geek out because I love history. I read about history all the time, and I'm like, wow, this is a cool part of history that I didn't really know much about, Joseph, uh, with the whole Indian War thing and the how it related to Florida and the Trail of Tears and Arkansas. And before we get into the book, I just want to say I'll take your guys' questions at the end if you have any super chats. And again, if you have any super chats, you can do it also in Stream Elements. All that I ask is let's kind of keep it on topic. I don't want to take a question about COVID or something. Let's just kind of, but if you want to tie this to modern times, that's cool too. And first of all, to discuss this book, The Runaway Masters, it's a book about the Seminole. Am I pronouncing that right, or how do you pronounce
Sure.
it?
A seminal,
Seminole
yeah.
Indians, and and their interaction with some African American blacks who were slaves, and the British and the Spanish and the Americans and how all that related. And so the first question I have to you, Joseph, is what got you interested in this particular subject?
Well, I'm from Florida, and Florida has a really rich history that very often goes by the wayside. Because when people come here, they often think there was basically nothing around until Walt Disney came or until some.
I was just thinking that when you think now of Florida, you think of Disney World and the Mickey Mouse. But yeah, it goes prior to Mickey Mouse, there was a culture there.
Oh, most certainly. It has the oldest. It was the oldest continuously occupied place in what's now the United States. Obviously, it wasn't the U.S. when it was settled, but no, Florida has a huge degree of history, and there are so many different folks who have come here. That's why it's been traditionally called the land of the five flags: the Spanish flag, the French flag, the Confederate flag, the British flag, and of course the American flag, because all these flags flew over Florida. Now, when it comes to the story that I wrote, there were three different wars that took place in Florida between the early and mid 1800s. They were called the Seminole Wars. And if you drive around parts of Florida today, you see battlefield, historic sites, signs for all of this. But a lot of people have no clue what the hell it is they're looking at because they assume it's the Civil War, when in reality, it was quite different. And it was because of these Seminole Wars, essentially, that I'm sitting here talking to you today, that Florida came to be a place that was settled by non-Seminoles, and in a big way. Of course, there were British and Spanish folks who coexisted with the Seminoles, but the Seminoles generally ruled everything in Florida outside of a few colonial towns. And even though the whether it be in the case of the Seminoles, Spain or Britain that technically had control over Florida, that the Seminoles, in a de facto sense, really exercised dominion over it. Like I said, a few very small exceptions. And so the history here is so rich and so fascinating. And I always knew about it generally. I figured that with this whole craze regarding slavery now, where it's basically been reduced to, white man evil, white man did this, everything is done by a white man, that's terrible, and nobody else did anything at all. I thought that there needed to be some essentially serious historical information disseminated to the public about how slavery actually played out, specifically within the context of American life. And I can hardly think of a better story than that of the Seminoles to show that slavery was nothing as simple or as politically charged as people make it out to be today. It was a very complicated thing. It took place, it took different forms in different places. And slavery itself is something that does not neatly lend itself toward current, events that people like to use a very skewed version of history as a rationalization for whatever their point of view is. So it's really